Good morning, everyone. I'm Ann Rue, and I'm the director of the Policy Impact Project that is hosting our webinar today. I'm going to share with you just a few slides about who we are and what we do. So the Policy Impact Project is a collaborative venture at the A.J. Drexel Autism Institute in Philadelphia. And it is directed by Lindsay Shea and run by Kyle Shabasta, Kylie McLean, myself, and Sam Voltaire. The project, our mission is to use research findings to propel systems level policy solutions that improve the lives of autistic adults and children and those with developmental disabilities. So we know that there is a huge gap between research findings that exist and awareness of those findings among policymakers and people who are making decisions. So our project aims to fill that gap. And we largely do this through dissemination. And so we'll share our website at the end of the webinar so that you can go check out all the topics that we have been covering over the past several years. But we aim to share knowledge so that we can inform decision makers. We aim to facilitate conversations with our peers like we're doing today, and then to advance research and inspire future investigations. So we're really excited about this topic today. There is very, very little published about immigration and how it affects immigrant populations. So families that are coming into the United States, we don't know much about how they deal with navigating anywhere from autism diagnosis to what happens as they age into adulthood and have to navigate transitions. We know that people face many challenges, ranging from being diagnosed later than average to difficulties obtaining information and navigating systems. And so we're really excited to have a wonderful panel with us today who's going to share their experiences around assisting families who are immigrants, who are raising children with autism or supporting adults with autism. I'm going to turn this over to Georgina, who is going to facilitate our conversation today, and she will introduce our panelists.
Hi, my name is Georgina Perez. I am a physician by training, and now I work as a research associate at the A.J. Drexel Autism Institute. And I am thrilled on multiple accounts to be moderating this conversation today with these fantastic panelists that are joining us for this conversation on autism and immigration. So today we have Karina Castillo from Corazones Unidos por el Autismo. Karina is a very accomplished mentor, parent supporter, and also book author from Allentown, Pennsylvania. We also have Khalil Robinson, who is a speaker, motivator, a panelist, and a community autism peer specialist. Also, we have Veera Mukherjee, I'm always practicing my new names, who founded and runs Resolvera. And what they do is focus on parent workshops, consulting with early intervention agencies, and supports of that kind for the community at large. We also have today Young Sobe, who is the Executive Director of Community Inclusion and Development. And it's a Development Alliance, which is a grassroots organization and also has extensive experience in special education. So thank you for joining us. And also we have Sarong Sorn, who comes from the Department of Behavioral Health and Intellectual Disability Services. She's the Director of Immigration and Refugee Affairs and Language Accessibility for the City of Philadelphia. So thank you for joining us today, and we're really excited to bring all these different perspectives into the conversation on this topic that is so multifaceted, because people in the autism community, on top of different challenges that come with co-occurring conditions, accessibility, there's also language barriers and maybe other conditions that can play a role in how people access services and enjoy opportunities. So I wanted to start off this conversation by asking you all to tell us a little bit about how you came into this work, how just share a little bit about your experience and how you landed on this field. Let's see. What about we start with Karina, since we started with your introduction? Is that okay?
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Karina Castillo. I am the executive director of Corazones Unidos para el Autismo. And I started, my son got diagnosed with autism. And when he first got diagnosed, I didn't know nothing about autism. And it was hard for us, being that we were bilingual. So I couldn't imagine what it was like to not know English. And so it was very difficult. And I noticed that we needed more information and resources to connect families so they don't feel that they're alone. And that's where we started Corazones Unidos para el Autismo. And it started as a small group, and then it has become this big organization that I am really honored and proud to be a part. Thank you.
Great. It's amazing how personal experience can be so transformative to turn it into it really turned you into an activist, and it really turned you into an advocate to support other people along the same path. Thank you. What about Vera? Would you tell us a little bit about how you came here?
Sure. So I started my career as a special educator in India in 2002. And while I was working there, soon I realized that I was getting more curious about, transitioning, because I was working with mostly teenage, children there. And um, it was a national institute, and most of the time the parents would come and question and say, what are we going to do after school? So I realized that to make myself a better professional, I need to study a little further. And I tried to look for PhD courses in special ed. Unfortunately, in US, I couldn't find a single program that would support an international student or provide any funding or scholarship. So I changed my gears, and I became a social worker, and I did my PhD in social work, but my core was transitioning young adults with autism. And that was also my focus of the research and my title of research. And that's how I came in. And I realized that I am still existing in this field because I'm curious. I realized over these years that there are very good professionals who are doing really good research, but unfortunately at a certain level it leads on to creating the demand, but nobody really is looking into how to address the demand, because that's more challenging. And that's where the gaps lie. And I like to focus on what happens to people who fall through the gap, who are not really talked about, the young adults, the teenagers. We are teaching them independent life skill from a very young age. And then suddenly something stops and there's a barrier, and parents have a very difficult time in deciding what to look for, where to go ahead.
Yes.
Immigrant families, it's huge problem. So that's what my consultancy, I started as a volunteer. And 5 years, it was just volunteering work in the community. And then now I do like consultancy. I work with families and nonprofit organizations to help them support families and immigrant population to navigate the system.
I'm getting already very excited about this conversation because we were talking a little bit about the experiences from little kids being diagnosed now to adults or young adults transitioning into further stages. So this is already getting very excited. Young, would you be able to tell us a little bit of how you came to this field?
Sure. My path is exactly like the other panel members here. I have a 28-year-old son with autism. When he was born, we are living in a area where there's not much resources were available. Of course, I was one of the very few men minority in the neighborhood. Um, I start to searching for some answers because I really do not have some information. Also, where to start to educate my child. So my background is totally nothing to do with my the current career. I was from the finance field, but they changed my um, actually, I did the career change. I went to a special education major, become a teacher, and move on to the PhD in special education, specialize in intellectual disability and autism. So I became very interested in the academic, the aspect of child with autism, but later I become involved with the immigrant community, especially those Asian families who were having difficulty navigating service system. As you know, developmental disability service system, where whether you are in New York or other the region is very complex and hard to navigate. So I became involved and I end up establishing a nonprofit organization in 2016. And here we are. And CETA is probably the largest, the Korean American base, um, the nonprofit organization serving people with a disability and their families. Also, we now serve other Asian families in New York regions.
Wow. And do you focus on any particular country of origin, or is it Asian at large?
Right. So we primary language we they provide through our services is a Korean and Mandarin, the Chinese language, and we have a couple of staff who are able to also support the Cantonese as well.
Thank you. This is getting more and more excited as you guys start talking a little bit about your backgrounds, because we hear a little bit more of different regions of the world as well, right? So different backgrounds, different experiences, different regions or different countries of origin that you're supporting. So this is fantastic. Khalil, would you like to tell us a little bit about how you got involved here?
All right. So the reason I like mainly got involved here is because I am a community autism peer specialist. Community autism peer specialist was actually something that started off with the city of Philadelphia, the district attorney's office back in 2016, if I'm not mistaken, with I guess well now since he's currently there, current Dennis O'Brien. Both him and I and like another another like autism panelist was actually just like just kind of like expressing like how we were like feeling, which then like made the rights for Philly to I guess like be quote unquote the first autism friendly place, and it wasn't finalized until like 2019. So then after that, that's when I started like working alongside with the training. And as I did it, whereas everybody was just like explaining their way through like I guess like poems and stuff, I did mine through art, which I literally got like a blog. If there's like one thing you'll like notice about me is that I'm a part-time blogger, right next to me working with the city of Philadelphia alongside with Salon Sorn. Um, so that link you just like seen is is my blogging link for how I did art. And then of course what I currently do is that I am as you can see right next to my title being with DBH IDS, the Department of Behavioral Health and Intellectual Disability Services, is that I also work with the Community Wellness and Engagement Unit. And one of the things as I'm doing is as a CAPS, I am sharing my experiences not just to my team, but also to like families who may like have children, adults, or whomever with autism, and just seeing how I can like provide services for them. But at the same exact time, I also like make sure I promote wellness. So I would like use wellness as a facet with autism, and alongside with this conversation, alongside as this like discussion like goes on, I will like I make sure I do provide one more piece of information that I think is going to take up a lot of time. But with that, I am glad to like share my experiences with someone who's been battling those highs and lows of like someone who's autistic and thought would never be able to walk or talk or do anything socially acceptable, to now working with the city of Philadelphia, being a self-advocate in any field and place that I possibly can.
Yeah, thank you. This is fantastic. You're bringing a unique piece with your lived experience and also with your peer support experience. This is fantastic. Let's move on real quick to Sarong. So you are also at the city of Philadelphia.
Yes,
Tell us a little bit about it.
sure. So my name is Sarong Son, my pronouns she, her, and I am currently the Director of Immigrant, Refugee, Affairs and Language Access Services for the department. Well, how I came to this department, well, what I do is I develop language access, policy procedure, and also do program development and implementation to ensure that immigrant, refugee, and special population understand and know how to access services within the Department of Behavioral Health and Intellectual Disability. I can talk a little bit, further down, but that's my main role and responsibility. But personally, I am a former refugee from Cambodia, and I've been here for 30 plus years, and I have been working in immigrant refugee for over 30 plus years. In many capacity in a nonprofit running social services, advocacy, and many sort of thing. So I have seen the various challenges for immigrant refugee accessing services. And when the Department of Behavioral Health is looking to hire a language access coordinator and immigrant affairs, that's how I came to this position here at the department as a language access coordinator, but also expanded to immigrant affairs, which really to ensure that we do outreach and engagement to all of the various immigrant refugee community to promote awareness and understanding about, signs, symptoms of behavioral health, and also, IDS, and really increase access to care for immigrant, refugee, and special population. Personally, I have two nephews who are on a spectrum, and I have a few friend colleagues who have children with autism. So I see firsthand of my family, navigating, having difficulty accessing. One of my nephew, who is now 24, finished high school, but really in a stagnant, like he really not having the support that he need to be able to make a living on his own. And then my other nephew now, he lives in North Carolina, but because of the challenges at school, they just send him home, and he have to be homeschooled by his mom, which is limited resources and understanding of how to really provide the education that he need and also support with his challenges. So that is like heartbreaking for me. So personally, I have, a lot of compassion and for family who have autism. So
Sarang, I really appreciate you sharing this with us. Myself also, like you and others here on this panel, I am kind of like, my positionality brings me from different ends tied to this topic. I'm an immigrant myself. I also am a parent to a person on the spectrum, and like you, professionally involved, but also still pulling very strong strings attached to your heart. And that's what makes our work very interesting and also unique in the sense that it brings this passion for the topic, right? And we for sure have, experienced our own challenges, but I would like for all of you to share a little bit more about, what challenges have you seen in your experience working with immigrant autistic individuals and their families, whether they are children, young kids, or young adults, or even adults. Can you share a little bit, maybe one example of an experience that has really stuck with you, that really is like a good example of what it is like to work with autistic people and their families while they're immigrants? Let's see, who wants to go first? What about Young? Would you like to go first?
Sure. Yes. Speaking of immigrant families, and I guess the priority issue at this point is language access. Whether you're coming from Asian countries and other regions, the language access, as you know, the Title VI of Civil Rights of 1964 requires any federally funded agency must provide the language access related to the services and communicating with the stakeholders. So not many, the state has a very concrete and comprehensive policy on that. And in terms of accessing services, in our individual and I'm talking about our young adults and children with autism, rely on their family, their parents to get the information, and so that their children can access the service they need, either during the school or even after the graduating the school system. So, without having, the language access, and our parents cannot actually help their children to get into the service system, whether not only the special education, outside the school system is much more complex. So that is something that we really just work together and make changes in the policy gaps. And New York State, particularly, they launched the Office of Language Access under Governor's Office the last July. However, just like any other states, and as you know, the New York is a huge the state, and we have so many language, so many different immigrant groups is existing at the moment. But despite that fact, the language office just launched under Governor's Office has a very small budget, unable to cover all this disability issue, and on top of that, the school system. I believe majority of the Department of Education is not under jurisdiction of the Language Access Office under the state. They have their own policy under education law. So that's something that the advocacies are struggling to actually find a solution, how we can make this language access law streamline, also all these federally funded agency compliant with the law, and provide services that our children and their families deserve.
This thing that you're mentioning is very relevant because, language is a very obvious first barrier, but there's also the matter of how these language services are provided, right, in different environments and in different subsystems. And this can definitely add on just to the language barrier itself and another challenge. And then if you add on top of that different accents that might complicate conversation, like sometimes even if people are proficient in English, the accent, the families that I've worked with, sometimes they say that they have been, treated in a different way just because they had an accent. So probably the providers are sometimes also a little bit biased, and we have to all, as professionals, check our own implicit biases when dealing with people of different backgrounds. Mm-hmm. So yes, Karina, would you like to share a little bit of your experience with the challenges, a good example that shows particular challenges of serving immigrant families that have an autistic loved one?
So I think what Yang said is, the language barrier is always like one of those things in our community that our families struggle with. A lot of our parents seek help for language barriers, and there's providers that are not sensitive to culture, the culture sensitivity. I know, like I had a case where one of my parents has two children, one in the spectrum and one younger, and she had a situation where for months she told her family doctor that the child was falling, he kept falling, and that if they can prescribe him a helmet for her to put, so he, just in case he fell, he wouldn't get hurt. So he did get hurt. He eventually got hurt. They dismissed, her concerns, and the child ended up having a fracture. And after that, children and youth, everybody was involved. So, and it was just, it was very difficult for her, being that she didn't understand what was going on. And so, we had to work as organization, I couldn't get involved because it was, we had to get like lawyers for her and all that. We didn't, but individually as a parent and as a mother and as an immigrant, I was like, we have to, fight through this case. We have to talk about it and see where they can change those areas. I was able to translate for her and also with the lawyer because the lawyer was only English speaking, he was not Spanish speaking. So it was very difficult for her. She not only suffered for anxiety, but she also suffered from depression with all this situation that had happened, and the child was removed from the home. And the other child that had autism, he was removed from the state because she couldn't. Yeah, so it was that to me was a very difficult case that I had to encounter with this mom. Today she's now has her child, but it cost her a lot of, emotional and mentally on stuff, frustration and stuff that she didn't have to go through. So
Yes.
definitely
So-
it's a language battle.
Yes, and so on top of all of this, the language that we mentioned, the cultural sensitivity, and then there's the legal aspect, right, of all the immigration implications and the immigration status that can put constraints on the access that families have to services, or also of how they get to
Falsely
take care of their
accused. She
children.
was falsely accused as a caregiver and as a
Yeah.
parent of being neglect and child abuse. So that whole situation cost her and her child, to this day to be able to understand the what has happened. And you can, our children's don't, and I say our children's because I have two in the spectrum. We don't know the degree of what effect or what trauma they have encountered until along the way when you see those behaviors come, especially for a child that are not speaking. You don't see that. You see that they can't express what they're feeling. So then you see them behavioral, So.
Yes, that's yeah, you're right on point there. And Sarah was mentioning on the chat about other factors such as the lack of awareness regarding autism or different ideas around it. Can you comment a little bit more on that, Sarah?
So, as a refugee myself and my family and community that I work with, oftentimes we don't even we're coming from a country that did not really have these luxury of diagnosis or support services for family member with autism. So we don't even know, and lack of understanding of that. So for example, we know that a lot of children who are not being evaluated early on for early intervention and prevention, and then once they learn, it's kind of like they age further down the road, and really have a lot of put a lot of stress and challenges for a family to really know where to go and how to access services, navigating. So those are the very kind of go hand in hand, and stigma, right? It's kind of a combination of lack of awareness and understanding, and also get early diagnosis, advocating for services, and navigating. So kind of all of that. And then with the stigma in the community, and that's really, stop family member from accessing services or not getting the services they need.
So what you have encountered is they don't even pursue the diagnostic evaluation or an assessment because of the stigma associated?
Well, not necessary. They may not, they may aware of their children might be unique and different, and but they may not understand why or what, or and then they may not because of lack of understanding of the autism, and so they just assuming that okay, that is just normal, that maybe that he's born with it and so forth, and just take the faith, just take whatever just accept what it is that the children are experiencing. For example, my sister, she was so frustrated and didn't know how to take care of her son when he act out, or he would not be able to socializing or be able to communicate with other. and wouldn't eat anything else but just one specific thing, for example. And she didn't understand that, right? And then she did not, her doctor, I mean, her child doctor did not, have early diagnosis. So that's also another thing, is that without knowing and aware of, the autism, and not really understanding how to navigate or getting early diagnosis and able to access services, is really put a lot of immigrant family kind of behind, or unable to get the services they need.
Yes, yeah, I totally agree with that. And I was taking some notes because it seems that what we have all pitched into the conversation so far, the language barrier, not knowing the system, additional complications with legal status, cultural sensitivity, all of that, really we can put under the big umbrella of the things that really take a dent on families' empowerment, right? And sense of competency. And that's ultimately a big front that we want to develop in families who have loved ones with a disability, not just autism, and also especially with families that come from a different cultural and a country of origin background. So that is a key point that we're all kind of like putting our finger on the pulse of the issue there. And I wanted to
add in, because
yeah.
even what you was like saying about not you may know English, but because there's an accent or anything like that, there's people who would still misunderstand. And I think there was someone that I might have encountered where they might have had English, but it's just that there's just a certain version of English that they were able to understand, and because of that, they tried to ask for resources at the school, and the school I guess refused to give it to them, either because one of the children was too old, was too young, or the other one just was able to it was incomprehensible. And and it got to the point where even I went down to the school myself and just asked, and just seeing what what was there. And I mean, I didn't get that much in return for it, but I think it does kind of link pretty well to what you were mentioning there, where it's the parents do the parents you still hear that love and concern, but because it's I guess broken down, incomprehensible. Not saying that the school is saying that they're not able to do anything, but it's I guess the transition from the pandemic era and what may have you, that others are that they're not getting either the proper resources for it, or there aren't any places that could potentially support anyone who's going through those who need those supports.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Khalil. That's so relevant. I wanted also to shift gears a little bit and start by asking Vera, what are your thoughts on what good and culturally responsive policies and research would look like to you? I would like to hear the opinion of several of you, but I also have a couple more questions, so I think I'm gonna spread it out a little bit.
Sure. So, I want to just, touch base on the previous question that you had asked, and then move on to the good, cultural, awareness and policies that should be there for the community. So, I come from the South Asian community, and I work primarily with them, and I understand the language barrier, as Young says mentioned, that it's a big issue. It's a big issue because, and Karina would agree with me, when parents come to our agencies or talk to us and we speak their language, it's providing them the safe space to share their concerns, to talk about it. But then also there are challenges at multiple levels because you belong to the same community. A professional from the same community has its own challenges because then you're facing, where the denial is coming from, where the anxiety and the stress and the stereotypical, responses given to them and the hesitation is coming from. And you are trying to address that. But on the other side of the table, the client expects you to be in their shoes and help them and understand and voice their thoughts. And you're at the same time kind of a representative of the system, navigating the system with them. So that's a challenge in itself from the professional angle. So that is one of the experiences that I have faced as, a professional working in the field. Like you are somewhere stuck and you're hanging in between the community and the system, and you're just trying to strike that balance. As far as the policies and the cultural competent part is concerned, I primarily focus on the transitioning young adults with autism. And I feel that one of the screaming challenges for young adults is when they are getting ready to be a part of the larger community and lead an independent life. Sharon, I absolutely agree with you. It's a very frustrating situation because we have a plethora of services during the school years. We have the IEP, we have the independent, living skills being taught, everything is happening. And then the child is aging out of the school system, and suddenly there is this sharp fall in services. It's like they are pushed off the cliff and expected to fly on their own, which is a very challenging situation, not just for the individual who's diagnosed with autism. That individual could be at anywhere on the spectrum, mild, moderate, severe. But imagine the plight of the parents, because they are now in a situation where they don't know what to really look for. Here is a child who has always been told that, oh, they're learning skills and, they're getting independent and they know this and that. And suddenly these hands are empty because they don't know what form to sign up for a vocational training. Now, within the system, people who are non-immigrant community, they face this challenge. But this is 10 times more for an immigrant community member, because then there is a language barrier. There is issues navigating the already complex system. And there is also the immigration status of the community member. When we think of immigration, automatically we think legal versus or documented versus undocumented. But then there is a huge gray area where the community members is legally documented, but unfortunately, because of their legal status, they are not eligible to get a service. And I'll give you an example of that. A couple of weeks back, I also do fee for service for a mental health clinic, and I was working with a family, and one of their other kid is on the spectrum. And the family, the parents came up to me and they said, we really want to talk to you. And we know that you also work with the community on issues related to autism. We're having a very significant problem with our child who's aging out of the school. And they are legally here, but their immigration status is linked to the country, the embassy they are working in. So this is an embassy, the foreign embassy employee. And because of that legal status, the family was unable to get a service for this aging out young adult because they don't fall on the labeled category of services. They are not eligible for a particular insurance that is covered by the state or federal. They don't know what the form to sign for. These parents were running pillar to post, looking for a vocational service, and they couldn't sign up anywhere because they didn't know what would be the right fit with the immigration status of the child. Now, this is an immigrant community. I speak their language. So I started exploring and I started talking to them. Now, the concept of independent living, having a separate insurance while the parents are, living and the child is also living with them. These are concepts that are not automatically there in the minds of the immigrant population. Living separate from a child or having a separate insurance or independent living, concept of group home, setting up a foundation or a trust for a child for independent living is pretty challenging. And there is nobody in the system to actually make the family, the community aware about this. So there is a lack of awareness, there's a lack of education. Mm-hmm. Also in the system, when we talk about vocational training, there is no questions asked about what is, okay, other than documented versus undocumented, there is another area, what would work best for you. So that is a big challenge because we are only looking at black and white. What about the gray areas? And people fall through those gray areas, those gaps. And I think that is what the policymakers should really start looking into, because this is a big population that we are talking about. It's increasing by the day. And it's not just about any state, but of course, for sanctuary states like New York, it is a big problem. And and these communities are actually spreading. COVID was a situation when families moved out to many different states and areas, and those populations have increased, but there is nothing significant in the policy change. There is nothing that has been talked about. We know the demand, but again, the question is nobody's addressing the demand.
Yes, and I completely agree. You touched on several on several key points about the what really is the core of the immigrant experience or the immigration experience, right? I would like to backtrack for a second and remind everybody that immigration is a unique experience within the human experience, which means that you, for whatever reason, you had to leave behind your place of origin and whatever little or much you had in hopes of something in the new place where you're settling. And that is a very unique process that if you add on top of that the reality of having a loved one with a disability, and not knowing the system and having a language barrier, it is a totally much more complex challenge for people to overcome when they face difficulties. So thank you for highlighting that, because that is, I think, at the very core of this intersection between immigration and autism. And then the other thing that you were talking about, Vera, that I would like maybe Sarong or Young, if you guys are kind of like up for answering this, is that there are multiple complexities within navigating the system that change depending on the age of the person on the spectrum that we're trying to support. And this is, like I've seen comments on the chat asking specific questions about, experiences with young people or with young kids, and then with young adults or transitioning into adult age. And I think that we can, at a later time, we can unpack a lot more from this. But I wanted to just get your thoughts on how these different complexities evolve as the person evolves throughout the system and within multiple systems. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Sure. So, if I may, I can speak first. Well, as a matter of fact, my son Eugene is actually studying the independent living. I think it's around September this year. Um, and it was big decision for our family. He's certainly not a person who can travel by himself. He still need a total assistant when he has to use a public bus or even the taxi. But we decide to move on and help him to find an apartment and live there, possibly potentially with a partner. Throughout the process, what we have learned is from transitioning from school to adult life, even during special education process, I believe it is a capacity building process for the family. And of course, we certainly need to change the policies, the system navigating, and all these things should be improved. But from family side, those things are not gonna be happening at once. But at the same time, we have to really just looking at ourselves, how we can prepare better for our children's transition. Of course, it is important to find the other services, transportation support, jobs, and the connecting with all these different agencies. But at the end of the day, as immigrant families, we are experiencing a little bit different in the community. Many of our families are single moms, do not have relatives nearby. And some of them, they have to really go through the guardianship because of their child has the very significant disability, and while others are able to do supported decision making. Whether or not, then you definitely need a community support, because when you need to make a decision, you want your child to have someone nearby and help them make a decision. If your child has a very significant disability, it certainly need someone to make a decision for the child's health and other financial decision, you want to have someone who can trust. And it is not an easy experience for immigrant families who are actually far away from homeland where all your relatives and families are there. So so capacity building in a sense that you knowing the system, but at the capacity building for you and your community, the members become a network. So, and in that place, I think it's very important for community-based organizations like us or everybody here, helping families to find someone in a neighborhood, someone in a church, create a sort of kind of circle of support and network of support. So, when our children with autism, our children have a very special characteristic. So when they get lost, when they need to make a decision, when they need to the access to services, where I'm no longer able to help them, I think we have to really create that kind of a support, that kind of capacity building around our families and also within the community.
Yes, I 100% agree. Before Vera or Sarang jump into this, I will also like to make a remark on something that I read on the chat as well. That was a comment from Beatriz saying that yes, we have to be mindful that a lot of immigrant families, same as non-immigrant families, but I think with a more pronounced challenge here, most of them live by the day, right? Day to day.
Yes.
And then in that context, if you are really just trying to catch up to the circumstances and trying to make it, one more day, one day at a time, it's very hard to develop the skills for advocacy, a sense of competency and empowerment that is really needed to advocate for our kids and their education. So 100%. Sarang, you were going to say something, and
Yeah,
then your hand up.
two things. One thing I see is a huge challenge transitioning from school to adult life is finding employment opportunities. Like that is I see across the people that I know. And
Oops, I think that the signal got slow here. Let's see. All right. While we figure out what happened, Vera, would you like to?
Yeah, so I just wanted to piggyback on what Young-Se mentioned, that, networking. So I am a very, I would say I'm a self-proclaimed advocate of the social capital theory, which is all about, relationships and building networks.
Yeah.
And networking is such a superpower that it just brings in like-minded people, and even those, like, it doesn't have to be like, professional, but if you know somebody in the community, if you know some organization, or if you are driving by and you saw, something that has come up, and somebody in your friend circle who is, a caregiver or a parent, you can build that bridge, you can be that road, the resource for the service. And that's very important, especially in the immigrant community. It is a huge community, but at the same time, it is a very close-knit community. And networking and relationship building really takes it a long way to, build that, to fill in those gaps and build those bridges. And I really, really appreciate that we are in this panel today, because we just started a relationship. We just started this network. And that is so helpful, because now I know about, Young's organization. I know about Karina's organization. And I can tell families who are in these locations that, hey, this is something that I came to know. Why don't you talk about it? There could be collaborations. There could be, partnerships. There could be a research. And there could be something new to look forward to, instead of, beating around the bush and then feeling sad and frustrated about it.
Yes, and I agree with you. You know what's so interesting? I read a little while ago a research paper on parent peer support, and it's no secret for some of the people on this call or on this webinar that I'm involved, or I have been involved over the years with an organization called Parent to Parent of Pennsylvania, which is, like a nationwide organization that has chapters in each state. And one of the interesting things that ties onto what you were saying is that people who study parent peer support, meaning like parents who support other parents with children with disabilities or complex medical conditions, the parents who tend to use more of those services are the people who are not US born. more than the people who are US born, regardless of the language they speak. So it's not a matter of immigrants, just recurring to this service because the language barrier that they're facing within the system. It's a matter of forming those connections and how these connections really facilitate the growth and the access that they might have. And also kind of like speed up the learning curve, because like we said, like they're getting up with or trying to learn things about how to set up services, how to set up the electricity, how to set up the the gas service in their or how do leases work, how does insurance work, specific things that are very unique to this system that we live in. And on
Right,
top of
create a
that,
social circle for the individual who is
Yeah.
diagnosed, or find even like a partner to live with them, because you never know what treasure you would hit when you are networking.
that's a very good phrase. I'm gonna keep that. What treasure you would keep. Let's move on, because I think that we're getting close to the end time, but this is actually getting more exciting by the minute. I wanted to ask you, at least a couple of you, what do you think policymakers and people who make decisions about services should really take away as a message about working with immigrant communities? What do you think, Karina?
I apologize.
Oh, sorry, I was back.
My internet. I'm sorry.
No problem. We're happy to have you back. Thank you for rejoining. So we were just saying, what is it that you might think policymakers should know, or policymakers and people who make decisions should really know and take away about working with immigrant communities? I was asking Karina her thoughts, but Sarong, if you want to jump in, feel free as well.
And let me jump into and just say that when we think about policy, we don't just think about laws and legislators, but we also think about things like clinical guidelines that medical providers might have in place to help them better serve families. So guidance for people who are working with families, that type of policy as well.
Thank you, Anne. That's very relevant.
Yeah, if I may add, it probably more effective and efficient if pediatricians really have or are required to do assessment early on, and really continue to asking parents if their children is having any delay, or the early diagnosis is so important. For example, physical health and mental health usually is not connected, but now primary physician or doctor in the office now also assessing that, right? To make that connection, because physical health and mental health are all interrelated. So the same thing for autism, that should be, regularly assessed and have early diagnosis, and provide the support, education and support to parents to how to navigate the services and be able to provide the connection. I saw some comment, and also through talking with some parent, that sometimes they just need to talk to another parent who have similar struggle, right? That make that connection, make that referral, that would be really helpful. So in a way, the policy from different agency, or the government agency, or organization, or the provider need to have that in place to really provide the opportunity for early diagnosis, advocacy, and early access to services, and a continuum of care, right? Not just like, okay, after high school, that's it. That shouldn't be like that. Should be a connection between transitioning from school to adult. How does that look like? Vocational training, or skill, any type of education that these folks need to be able to live in a become more self-sufficient, right? That's one of the challenges that we see, and that should be considered and be able to make that happen for every family, regardless of immigrant or any family who need the services. Because after all, it will affect the city, state, and federal more if these folks are not able to employ and rely on public benefit. While they are so skillful, from my experience, many of them are so talented in so many different ways in their own special niche, that we need to tap into and utilize those skills, like technology or whatever that they specialize in. Because I mean, I know some of my personal family member and friend children, they are so unique and so special and so talented. So I need to really highlight that policy maker or provider need to think about that, not from a deficit but from the strength base of
Yes.
these folks.
Yeah.
Yes,
George,
yes,
yeah.
Sarang, you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. Sorry,
Yeah.
Young, you were saying?
Yes, I'm sorry. May I just add a couple of short the points to what the two people just say before me. One is the educating medical professionals during their training, medical school. So as you know, our primary care physicians are they receive some training about the autism and developmental disability. Other the pediatricians it's like really the basic knowledge about identifying children with a disability or at risk, but it's still not enough. I think they have to really strengthen the education, educating these physicians during their medical school year, expanding more the clinical experience, also diagnostic tools, how to identify children who may have the autism or other the developmental disability. Number two is about the policy involvement. I would like to speak about rather than the creating of more policies, but rather involving policy making. And I see in even New York State, when policymakers pass laws, there are little involvement with the immigrant communities. They're mostly non-immigrant communities who know about the service system for many, many years, and who have a really close relationship with the lawmakers, come to the state floor and pass a law together. And we immigrant communities, immigrant families have no idea what kind of law just passed, and now studying the services. It's a huge gap. And I think our policymakers, have to really pay attention how to involve our immigrant families who are underserved, who have language barriers and cultural differences. And they should be part of this policymaking process. So I definitely like to advocate that part. And I think we should all work together to make it better, our stakeholders to involve in these policymaking processes.
Thank
I
you, Young.
absolutely agree
Absolutely.
with you. And just one little thing that I would add here is that at the grassroots level, at the providers level or organization level or mental health clinic or anywhere where we are actually seeing immigrant population or individuals with a diagnosis and families and caregivers, I think by nature we become very stick to and like questions which are not open ended, but it's like a more checklist based kind of an assessment. I think during the intake process at the very beginning, if we have open ended questions, we can get a better perspective of how families deal with certain situations and what are their perspectives and thoughts about the diagnosis, just to get an idea of how are they dealing with it. We are obviously professionals, we are on the other side of the table, we bring the system to them, we navigate the system with them. But how do I know what is happening in the mind of my client who just got a diagnosis for their child? How do they see it? Is it a religious perspective? Is it fear? Is it anxiety? Is it a personal value that is encouraging them to do a certain task and forego a certain service? I need to know the people I'm working with. So I think having open-ended questions at the very grassroots level during the intake process takes, at a better standing in understanding where we are and who we are working with.
Great, absolutely. And I'm seeing with much sadness how the time is shrinking and shrinking. But I want to keep going, and I just want to ask a couple of our last panelists in 30 seconds or less. Can you tell us one takeaway that you want the audience to take with them? Just Khalil, Karina, Sarang, tell me one thing that if people are going to forget everything about today, they should take with them.
I think that, go ahead.
So basically what I think that's like kind of like coming in mind, like from reading the comments, is like, like the idea of like, like transitioning going into like going towards like adulthood, that like not everyone is going to like be able to like talk or like like understand like the environment around them past their 22nd. And I think I did like see that off of like Selby's comment. So so it's like like I feel as though that like, well, personally there should be like some resources out there that should be like for them, and if there and if there isn't, like,
Whoops. Okay, frozen. Karina, do you want to go while we wait for a second?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's really simple. I think questions that we should ask parents are questions that we would like for us to be asked too. So like one of the questions it could be, how are you today? And how can we support you where you're at, not so much where we would want you to be at? Because a lot of parents don't, especially immigrant parents, they don't understand sometimes, or they don't want to express that they're going through something, or they're having some difficulties understanding the diagnosis. And
just
I think as a parent, gone through the whole process with the diagnosis and everything, it's important to allow parents to feel their feelings when it comes to the diagnosis, and how the dynamic of the diagnosis change, not just the child or the adult that is getting diagnosed, but also as a family. We all receive the diagnosis different. I can tell in my experience, I have my husband and we received the diagnosis different from my son. I wanted to go out there and advocate for him and make sure that he has all the services he needs. Like they said, when you fall, you get back up, you clean your legs, and you keep walking. And then as a parent, we don't feel the grief that happens with the thought of what we wanted our child to be, and now what we have to navigate through, not only through the diagnosis, but we also come from another country, like you mentioned. We've come from another country having trauma, generation trauma from passed on to us. And we as parents have to go through a manual, but once you get a child diagnosed with autism or any intellectual disability, you throw that manual away, because now you have to accommodate him, but you also have to accommodate yourself and a new lifestyle of living, of not just being the mom, but being the advocate, being the therapist, being the person that looks for the services. And I learned something that somebody told me, that is so simple. Sometimes it's okay not to be okay. You have to go through that process of grief, of loss. And if you think about all the different layers that us immigrants go through, being in, culturally, it's so many different layers that we're all working through just to get our son the services that they need, just to be able to have somebody to listen and say, hey, this is what I think my son has. And having that courage to be able to speak in behalf of what you feel, but as a parent, not as an educator, not as a professional, as a parent. Parents know best, but sometimes we don't feel like we know because we don't have the professional background. So
I agree with you, Karina. So thank you so much, everyone, for all your valuable contributions. I wanted to just keep going, and I just got several ideas about how to further move on to this conversation into more detail, depending on age group, depending on the kind of population that we're serving, on maybe broadening up commonalities that the autism community has with other disabilities in this front. So thank you very much for all of your insight, for all of your thoughts, and for your candid sharing of your own personal experiences. That's much appreciated. And as well to the audience for the questions and comments on the chat box. Thank you, everyone.
There will be a recording of this webinar on our website, policyimpactproject.org. So check back there. And just so much thanks to all of you today. I love where we ended of just talking about meeting parents where they're at and with what they need at that moment. That to me is one of the most important takeaways. So Thank you, and I hope we can find some ways to continue this conversation.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank
Have a
you.
wonderful afternoon.